Do you ever wonder why so many tank destroyer players seem to never do enough damage and of course end up never being able to reach above 50% win rate? Well, today we're going to have a look at two of the main reasons and ways in which you can surpass all of that and deal more damage. The first replay then that we do have today is played in one of the more recently buffed vehicles, the Turtle Mark 1, and of course this vehicle got a significant buff to just the general playstyle that this tank can offer, and it just makes this thing really devastating. Think of a Badger at tier 8 that's armor actually sometimes works, and of course you're seeing it on Mines, which is one of the more kind of difficult maps to get really super high damage games in your tank destroyers unless the enemy team are completely bots and you're just sat farming them in the back end, where you're seeing the STRVS1 in this game. But that's not going to allow you to perform all of the time, and you want to be able to perform all the time, which is why we're going to see this 3 Mark Turtle be able to just absolutely rinse opponents and come away from a situation that most other tank destroyers, most other tank destroyer players just simply would not be able to achieve and come out with the win. Now, the first thing that you're seeing here is of course an aggressive playstyle. This is one of the most important things that you can do when you're playing in a tank destroyer. Sometimes you're going to take hits, of course, but when you have the alpha damage or the DPM that this tank has, you can make it work really well. Now, one thing that you're seeing the Turtle actually do here, which is something that I don't usually see that many people do, is actually he was kind of moving back and forward, making it very difficult for his opponents to be able to reliably pen from the front. And what that means is he can get up to the hill area where you're seeing him right now to be able to just dominate these opponents. Now, the Iron Arnie manages to pen, and it's most likely either in the lower plate or he's been able to have super high penetration to go through the frontal armor, or he managed to hit the cupola of this vehicle. But luckily he's been able to deal a shot back, and within this game already, by being just purely aggressive in his tank destroyer, he's not only been able to get a lot of engagements, which gives you a ton of time to be able to learn the game. A lot of people just simply play their TDs, they may only get a couple of opportunities within a game to deal any real amount of damage, and that's going to significantly impact what you're going to be able to do. If you're only able to get 5 shots because you're camping at the back, you're just never going to be able to have these ridiculous games. And obviously when you're only dealing so many shots, you don't learn as much as you're going to do from aggressive gameplay like this, even if in the short term it ends up costing you a few games where maybe you do a hell of a lot less damage, maybe you get YOLO'd, etc. But you'll learn from those mistakes, and it's going to make you a way better player overall. Now, with him being able to take the aggressive position on the hill, he's been able to farm up some of the opponents like the ISU, this Patriot, who are having to do something to be able to try and get a shot onto him, or alternatively from behind him where you're seeing the Scorpion G, the Iron Arnie, and some of the other vehicles trying to make their way up, including the Guard. So there are 3 vehicles that are about to come and give some surprise fun from behind, but he needs to reset the cap or remove as much as their hit points as possible, which is why he didn't turn around, because sometimes, although it might seem the easy route for yourself to try and deal with some of the opponents that are going to YOLO across, it doesn't necessarily always mean that. And with now the Scorpion G not aiming, using his AP rounds with high penetration, he can go through the upper plate, which you saw there. But at the end of the day, now you've got to push the advantage. He manages to finish off the Scorpion G in 1 hit, realises that maybe there's going to be someone coming from behind. Luckily, the guard's already been removed, and there is just a T103 over on this flank. With the cap now being taken kind of into the equation again, there is about a 50 seconds before he needs to reset. Make that 2 minutes and 40 seconds, so a nice little recap or decap from one of his teammates there, allowing him to get back into position against the Patriot here. And this position is good and strong, but you have to ensure that no one comes from this location, which could happen, but he's just waiting for the opponents to make the misplay now. And that's something that you can do in the later stages of your games in tank destroyers. You very rarely see incredible games where tank destroyers sit back for the entire game and then have a really good result. They often go in, they try and deal a bit of damage, and then they come away and then maybe play a little bit more passively, play a bit more reserved, and then they can just use the hit points that they've kind of conserved to the end of the battle to start doing things in the later game and start kind of maneuvering around the map using those hit points, trading with opponents. And when you have a tank like this one, where it is an ultimate trader, it really does feel super nice, and an excellent play by him to be able to surprise this T103. Secures down one of the more annoying vehicles to get hit by. You could lose nearly the majority of his hit points left in this game, so getting rid of him is going to make it a lot easier. There's a Turtle, there's a T92, there's an EOC even 90 and a Pantera, all of which are going to be a massive pain if they can get around from behind him. So if he can finish off as many of these as possible, bouncing off of the Pantera, because of course, but trying to get rid of this EOC. The autoloader probably going to be the biggest threat in terms of if he gets around him, puts one into the T92, and now the enemy team are really in not a good spot. And he manages to finish off the T92 there blind. The Turtle obviously trying to make a play, but he overcommits with what he was trying to do here and then gets subsequently taken out. And really, it has just been a superb game playing in the Turtle. You can see how powerful that fast reload that this tank has, and when you start playing it more aggressively, like I always recommend in tank destroyers, and for the most part, most people, they sit in tank destroyers and they just don't do enough, such that they don't learn the game. They're constantly sat in tank destroyers like the Scorpion G, and usually it will slow down your progress as to trying to get better, and that's ultimately what we're here for on this channel, is to try and make as many players aware of different strategies and different tactics and ways you can improve, whether that be, you know, your entertainment of the game, or whether that just be purely, can I do a little bit more damage? So if you're interested in that, then make sure to hit that like button, because it massively helps me out, and that'll let me know that you guys are enjoying them. But more importantly, in this game, how is the Turtle going to secure the win against the artillery and the Pantera? Now, if I was this Pantera, I would just be constantly spotting the Turtle to allow my artillery to try and get a shot in. Maybe if I could go for the track, I would. But of course, Pantera takes a little bit of greed here, trying to get a shot, and the Turtle snaps around, getting a little bit lucky to hit this guy through the crack, and therefore, you know, he comes away with a decent result. Let's skip ahead a little bit until we can manage to find where this artillery is, because he is in the cap. It's just a case of kind of the end game and seeing if he can find him without taking a huge old hit. And so straight away he manages to find him, puts one straight into him, easy as you like, and now there's just a Lorraine on basically any HE round is going to finish this guy off. Slims down the shot, doesn't need to expose himself coming all the way around, as you know, you've got your gun halfway around the building anyway, and just manages to secure this win against 5 vehicles. And yeah, just a crazy result in general. Hopefully you enjoyed. Let's jump into the next one in a slightly different tank, in a slightly different matchup, and yeah, hopefully just as good a result. Now then, this next game features this tier 7 absolutely horrible tank to see in the game, which is the Cheeto SP. I'm pretty sure if you've played tier 7, you've probably been hit for one of these things, and you've probably lost a ton of health to it, and that is because this tank in general is just borderline overpowered, to be honest with you. It has a brilliant gun, which is how you've been able to see over 1300 damage done in a matter of a minute of the game starting, and yeah, manages to get his first enemy taken out in this game using the accuracy, just waiting for opponents to make the misplay, which is once again taking an aggressive start at the beginning of the game, as we always say, is one of the biggest things that you can do. You can get free damage. Yes, you may take 1, maybe even 2 hits at the beginning of the game sometimes, but in certain matchups like this one, if you do that, you can remove a lot of the damage that would be inflicted to you in the late game by tanks that you let just surpass in areas like you've seen there. And there you go, tries for the attempt on the T34 there, the tier 5. Not particularly a massive threat, but if you can remove him, removes one of the angles that he needs to be kind of looking at when he's cresting over. Now, with this tank being as good as it is, what he needs to do is just keep himself in the fight. Open up as many angles. Most people just are sat looking in one direction in their tank destroyers, which kind of is one of the biggest problems that you'll find, is that you know, I don't know, for example, this guy in the Cheeto might have just been looking at this T-34. Now that misses out on all of these tanks which are going to be in this area, and often you see this so much, and it seems like such a logical thing, like, oh, I should probably, if I can't hit one of the guys, try and find another shot. Maybe I get one, maybe I don't. If I don't, it's fine. Now, there are some caveats to that. Sometimes it is worth just focusing one guy if he's super dangerous, but a T-34 in that position where he's at, probably not that dangerous, not on particularly the most amount of hit points, and so he doesn't really need to worry about him. And so instead of doing the standard of kind of sitting there playing like a normal TD, he pushes up to here. This is probably one of the biggest kind of game changers within this game itself. Not only does he kind of spot some of the opponents, yes, he might not be getting any spotting damage, but he surprises them and they're probably not expecting him as a TD to push up to where he is. Now granted, this tank has a little bit of armor, and by a little I mean quite a bit, such that he can bounce a few rounds. Now people who know the weak points of this tank will be able to pen you the lower plate and also some of the flat areas with the cupola, but they're still fairly strong in a tier 7 game, so you can even bounce off of those sometimes. Side armor of this thing's awful, so you just need to keep your frontal armor to whoever you're going to be fighting, and you're going to come out way better than some of the opponents you'll be facing. Now, with that push, it's opened the game up. There's a massive kind of divide now between his side and the enemy side. The enemy side are in a much worse position. Now, that allows him to kind of take advantage of the enemies just kind of getting demolished or steamrolled by his team. And so he's able to push up and start dealing a bit more damage in this game. And you're seeing here, he's picked up 4,300 damage. And I mean, you've just seen within a couple of plays, taking that early position, then moving up to the position like you saw earlier, where he's able to kind of surprise him. And it's just like this. It's just super simple, but really effective. And like 90% of people just don't do it. And here you go, a typical example of a TD that's probably moved to one position, realised that he's got no shots, tries to move to another, makes a way too big overcommitment and gets taken out super quickly. Yes, it might have been a low tier tank, but trust me, this carries on up until tier 10. You see tier 10s doing it all of the time, and hopefully you won't be one of them. Yeah, I just want to make it super clear that you can play World of Tanks as much as you want, you can play it however you want, and I was just simply trying to showcase that it's not all sitting in bushes, it's not all sitting back, and often the best games you'll have are the ones where you're able to push forward and you do make the right choices when pushing and come away with results like this. Yes, there's a lot of low tier vehicles in this game, which makes it substantially easier, but even in the high tier games, when you know when to push and when you do make aggressive plays that really force the hand of your opponents, you can still have brilliant games. And that's kind of one of the key things that most people miss out on when they're playing in their tank destroyers, and hopefully you won't either. But now what we're going to have to do is try and deal with the multiple opponents from one side. What do most people do? They just try and, you know, share the damage between both sides, get caught in the middle, and then eventually get sausage sandwiched, which, trust me, being sausage sandwiched from both sides in can be very unfortunate, and yeah, it's not particularly too fun. So what you want to do is try and go after one side, and you're seeing here he's just focusing now this P43, but he's up on the ridge such that if the J Panther actually gets spotted, he's going to be, or comes up to this ridge, he's going to get spotted, and then he can just come down this ridge. And because he's on the top of the ridge, it's really not that difficult to avoid it as long as you're paying full attention. The J Panther actually pushes up, which, I mean, fair enough, he's trying to make a play. The game is looking not too great for his team, but that allows him to get one into him. It could potentially all be over, but because of the slim shot, by getting behind this ridge here, using the gun depression that the tank gets, is able to finish him off, and therefore, you know, just drastically improve the chances of winning. There's a P43 on basically a one-shot with the 320 alpha that this gets, and of course there is a final tank in the STRV M42 that is also on a one-shot as well. So both tanks are going to be able to be taken out, which makes it a lot of an easier position for him to push in, reset the cap, remove any chance of the enemy team from being able to do anything, and hopefully get a little bit of team support against this STRV who may crop up from somewhere, because when it is an autoloader, you have to be a little bit careful. The P43 is just not looking, as you can expect. There's so many angles from the cap where he could come from, and so he finishes him off. There's just an STRV that's trying to make a play against the Cromwell, but it doesn't look like he's going to be able to survive it, and we'll jump ahead quickly until this guy hopefully gets taken out. Now the STRV actually farms up an AFK Cromwell who's in the base and also kills his teammate, but luckily the tank manages to destroy the STRV. And of course, if you want to help me, destroy that subscribe button if you aren't already, and of course join me back for another video soon